G'day guys, welcome back to SuperCoach with DR and welcome to the round 19 stock market video. Hope that you're all going well. I'm going to keep this one shorter this week, given the fact that we are really getting to the pointy end of the season. Only 4 weeks to go. It is the first week of our SuperCoach finals, so congratulations if you've managed to get through to any of your league finals. But I suppose the issue is, at this time of the season, we're all in different positions. For some coaches, you've completely run out of trades. All you can really focus on is making sure you get your captains right each week. But for other coaches who may have been a little bit more conservative with their trades, or just simply luckier when it comes to injuries, you might still have a few in the bank. You could be looking to cover for an injury this week, or even just look to make a luxury upgrade. So Georgie Hewitt down the bottom, I think he is a sell if you've got the trades in the bank and you're able to do so. It's a second week that he's going to be missing with that back complaint, so that does worry me slightly, and I think that we've got another great trading option this week to replace Stewart if you've got a little bit of extra coin, and that's Tommy Stewart back after 4 weeks off. If you're looking for a downgrade option, you need to go all the way down in order to make that upgrade, then Cully, I think, will be the best option this week. We'll talk about him when we get to the rookies. So apart from that, guys, hope that you're well. Take care. Let's start off with the 500k plus defenders. At the top of the list this week, we have Jack Sinclair. It's been awesome owning this bloke. Only a hard tag will stop him from scoring hundreds every week. And it's funny, well, not so funny to owners that I mentioned this, because in the next 4 weeks, he does face 2 potential tags in McGuinness and Clark. And, you know, both have been playing their roles really well, wearing their opponents like a blanket. So this is actually quite concerning. I'm preparing for a potential 70 type score this week. I'm usually a glass half full type bloke, but I'm just not expecting big things. But in saying all this, in last month, his scores read 150, 110, 133, and 117. So a heap of upside there. And I'll be praying that Finn will go straight to steal this week and leave Sinclair to run free. But I think there's a slim chance of that happening. The next bloke, Harry Himmelberg, identical 3-round average with a 120. Was just a few dollars short of being able to trade him in for Hewitt last week, which was really frustrating. I would have happily brought him in. Along with Sinclair, the most informed player on this list, and also has the lowest break even, averaging 90 on the season. But since making the move down back, has averaged 118, a couple of 130 plus scores on the trot, and he's looking great. And here's a quick slide just to show you what he's done since moving to defence and why I think he should be really high on your hit list next year. But keep in mind, he's no guarantee to stay down back depending on what the new coach wants to do. So we can see in round 10, he did make his move to defence, priced at 318,100, scored 80 during that first week, looked okay. And then after that, just has not put a foot wrong. 126 a week after, boom, a 187, 95, the 114, 101, 98, and then followed that up with a couple of 130s in the last fortnight. So that average, if you look at it purely since he's moved to defence, is actually 118. So next year, as I mentioned, I think there could be some real value with the pick. The Sis, he gave us another sub 100, but none of his low scores have been disastrous. Got a nice floor as well as a nice ceiling, so things have balanced out over the last couple of months. But he's lost that red hot early to mid-season form. Still a good pick though. Now the big news is that Georgie Hewitt is out again this week. So in my opinion, definitely a sell if you've got the trades to do so. Obviously dealing with a back problem, and I've just got no idea how long it's going to linger on for. So I'm moving him on, thanking him for some wonderful service in 2022. Been a terrific starting pick, but I just don't think that we can carry him. If you've got no trades in the bank, then you can't do anything. If you've got one, I would probably hold on to that trade if you've got cover. But if it's a matter of copying a donut, then yeah, it's up to you. It's a really tough one. Maybe just move him on, I think. Now, Dale, he's a super safe selection in my opinion. Only downside is a potential McGuinness matchup in our SuperCoach Grand Finals. That may put some really keen league players off, but he'll rarely let you down. He's a kicking king at the kennel. As we know, his disposal is elite. He can throw in a clanger here and there, but usually delivers darts and consistently hits his target. So I really like Dale as a trade-in option. Doc, he's been a little bit up and down lately. Could be a 70-something, could be a 120 plus. Bit of a mixed bag. So in my opinion, there are better options, probably safer, more consistent options, but his price point is very close to Hewitt's. On to the man who I think will be the most traded in premium this week, Tommy Stewart. I'm welcoming him into my side, and I'm just hoping he continues where he left off, even including his injury-affected score of 39. he's still the highest averaging defender this year. Ceilings off tap, we've already seen a 187, 174 and a 161 in his last match in round 15 against the Tigers. Rarely goes under 100, and when he does, his floor's high. Perfect luxury upgrade for a couple of blokes we'll discuss in a sec, or also for George Hewitt, as he's obviously not getting up this week. And Adam Saad was elite last week, and this one hurts a tad because I was really close to bringing him in for the man I just mentioned in Hewitt. Did everything, found a heap of the pill, intercept marks, running bounces, which is obviously standard Saad. Extremely damaging game from him. So, although he's been a little bit up and down lately, I do like him as a pod selection. Definitely prefer Stewart, but a decent option if you don't have the coin. And Jordan Dawson still managed to score okay with a hard tag for large periods of the game. As usual, moved in forward to break that tag, where he can also be damaging. A nice goal, contested mark, rarely wasted disposal, just so damaging, you know. He was apparently feeling crook during the week on top of the tag, so hats off to him, I think, this week at an affordable price now as a non-owner. And I've really enjoyed the last 3 weeks. Still a great selection, even though he's been down on his usual output. On to the defenders, 250 to 500k. At the top, we have Tom Barrass, has been in great form lately, has a really nice 3-round average, massive pod, but never one that's really been on my radar. 149, 132 last week, but the 2 scores before that, 75 and a 69. So high risk, high reward type. Luke Ryan, very up and down this year, but he's pumped out a nice pair of 128s, really low break even, so possibly the last time he'll be available at under 500k. Hardwick, cheap, but scoring's all over the place. In the last 6 weeks, he's delivered a 47, 81, 133, so that's some of the biggest variation in scoring you'll see. Tommy Atkins, he's been a pretty reliable scorer in the last 6 weeks with his change of role. Main issue is that that role may change again depending on the circumstances, but definitely worth a shout. Steve May, similar to Atkins over the last 4 weeks, he's gone to 108, 97, 89 and 109, so not going to give you 120 plus type scores, but they're respectable enough. Aaron Hall, out again this week, so I'd tell you what, if you were someone that traded him back in, I know a couple did last week, it's just, bitten your heart again, this pick. Poor old Hawley. Now, Jaden Shaw. Now, we need to talk about this bloke. He's finally on the chopping block for me. I've just ran out of patience. Sick of sub-tons. His highest score in the last 6 weeks is 100 against North. All other 5 games are under 3 figures. Did have just over a 30% CBA rate last week, but he's often starting forward. I don't know. You really used to rate his ball use highly, but lately he just can't hit a target to save himself. I just want him back in defence, but I don't see it happening. So if you can afford the luxury, you can certainly give him the boot. But I would personally prioritise trading out Hewitt over Short this week, purely because Hewitt's not getting up. And Crispy, I've also got this fella on the chopping block, playing midfield minutes along with some defensive minutes, but just hasn't troubled the SuperCoach score sheet lately. I'm not sure if his role will be affected with Maynard out. Could go either way, maybe a negative, maybe a positive. I'd probably just deflect to Collingwood supporters on that one, but there's nothing sexy about the pick. Great, we can basically lock him into play every game with his durability history, but that really doesn't matter when he's given us a 5-round average of 82, and that's being slightly kind because I did round him up a tad there. And look, even looking back to last week, had an okayish first half with the 13 touches, then went completely missing in the third before getting on his bike a bit in the last quarter with the 8 touches. Just can't buy himself a ton lately, and for that reason, I think similar to Short, if you do have the luxury to move him on, I would actually recommend it. The common question this week, particularly for non-Hewitt owners, will be, do we trade out Shorty or do we give Crispy the boot? I originally was making that exact decision this week before the news that, Hewitt was out came through, and I was definitely leaning towards trading out Short. Each to their own on this one, but that's certainly what I was thinking, and got a little bit more confidence in Jack Crisp bouncing back in some way. And talk about hard to trust. The man at the bottom of the list, Dane Zorko, is a very hard player to trust. And look, don't get me wrong, as a Mad Lions supporter, I hope he plays out of his skin each and every week. But as a SuperCoach selection, you're only going here, A, if you're really desperate, or B, if you're looking for a D7 M9 swing to loop each week, as we know his upside is actually potentially very big if things go right, but it's a big if. The downside is that in the last 2 games he's played after returning from injury, he re-injured himself again in both. There's a high chance he doesn't even get through this week, but he did score a 103 from 20 touches on the weekend. A pod and only 1% of sides. Richie's out this week. Kitty is back, I'm pretty sure. But there may be some extra points up for grabs in that distributing run and carry role off half back. So on field, not for me, but as a sneaky loop player, I don't mind it. And on to the solitary bloke under 250k that we're going to feature this week. As you can see, unless we get a debutant, the cupboard is pretty bare here. The main man to discuss is Jace Burgoyne, already gone up 55k. So last week was certainly the week to jump on. Came in for Bonner, so I think that one of the two will play in the 22 each week, but not a guaranteed starter. I've liked the look of him, to be honest. Scores of 65, 68, and a 58 in his first 3. So you pretty much have a rough guide as to what you're going to get out of him. Averaged just over 13 touches, 4 marks, and a couple of tackles per game. Actually had 5 tackles last week, which was impressive. If you're desperate for cover, or you've got a cash or trade stash, then you could pay up the 170k. But for me, the ship's probably sailed. A decent get last week, though, and his defensive mid DPP could come in super handy. On to the midfielders, 500k plus. Now, apart from Cripper, who I have on the chopping block at the bottom of the list this week, I think that all the other blokes here are realistic trading options. Some are in better form than others, some are more highly owned than others. So this really is team dependent. We've got Rory Laird, and his 3-round average just speaks for itself. What a year this man has had, just never punches out a bad score. And in my opinion, is probably the safest captain pick each week. Has a great draw to finish off the season. And he is someone who can really, really hurt you as a non-owner. And that is speaking from experience. On the other hand, I do own Zach Merritt, and what a delightful feeling that is. Going bananas, and if history is anything to go by, he should deliver another juicy score for us this week against the Roos, along with Laird, the most in-form mid in the competition. And even though it's a hefty price, if you have the cash, I'll just consider paying up for him. Clary delivered a sub-ton on return, but just great to see him back. 28 touches, but did lay 5 tackles, which was the most pleasing thing for me. It's not a huge number, but I was just worried that he may struggle with the thumb when grabbing onto a body or a jumper. But he looked fine, should be better for the run, and I expect him to have a big game this week in what seems like a must-win to keep on to a top 2 spot. Jack Steele played a monster game, real captain's game from the great man. So frustrating because I did trade him in earlier on the season, and a move I was pretty proud of, but sadly had to trade him back out a few weeks later when he injured his shoulder. Since his return, hasn't put a foot wrong. 115, 107, 109, then really kicked into gear in the last 2 with a 133 and a 141. My man Spills traded him in a couple of weeks ago, so well done, mate. Super move there. He's one of the uber elites, and geez, I wish I still owned him. Highly recommend him as a trading option. The next bloke I feel will be a SuperCoach staple in the years to come. The man with the shaggy mop, Chad Warner, been on fire lately. Really exciting player to watch. 4 nice 100-plus scores on the trot with a 155, 108, 148, and a 110 last week. And how's this? Apart from his 35 disposal game against the Dockers, in rounds 16, 17, and 19, he accumulated exactly 18 kicks and 7 handballs. Talk about consistency there. Has also booted 7 goals in the last month as well, including a 3-goal game against the Dons. I just love his burst from the stoppage, love his work rate, love everything about him. So if you're after a real pod that's in red hot form, look no further than this man. Callum Mills, his Sydney teammate, has been thrown around in a couple of different roles lately, attending some CBAs at times, starting off a wing, also playing behind the ball when needed. He's a little bit up and down on his overall season form, only going over 100 twice in the last 5 weeks, but all you need with this bloke is one nice ceiling game and you'll be a happy owner. Already produced a 137, a pair of 138s, 147, 167, and a 214. So I wouldn't be too concerned as a current owner, even though he's been a little bit down. I'm sure he's got another big one in him. Lockie Neal, he's tracking along okay. Haven't seen a ceiling game from him in a little while, but just getting the job done. The poor bloke cops attention basically every week, but hopefully he should be in for a big game against the Tigers. Last 3 scores against Richmond, been 190, 149 and a 107. He's only given us 2 sub-tons for the year with an 87 and an 89, so very safe pick, but I'm assuming we've all got him anyway. Sammy Walsh, thought he was gone last week. The bloke's ankle looked cooked, but in true Walsh style, he came back on and was probably Carlton's best player in the third quarter. I assume he should be fine for this week. Not 100% certain on that. Hasn't reached the heights of the Zeret pick, but been solid nonetheless. Andy Brayshaw, another one who's been a little bit down over the last couple of weeks. Over the last month, he scored a 134, 132, then dropped to a 96 and a 79. Produced a really solid year to date. Big chance to take Charlie home, but those lower scores are a slight concern. And I've just got a feeling that CD just don't have a lot of love for him. And Paddy Cripps, finally, after 5 sub-hundreds in a row, we get something to be happy with. He's looked a lot better in the last couple of weeks. Nice 118 on the weekend meant that he continued to pump out a really nice average without Hewitt in the team. And with George out again this week, I think that's actually good news for Cripper. Had a few shots on goal, nailed one, but his other shots are pretty ordinary. One terrible out in the full when he tried to snap around his body rather than just go for the drop punt. And that's about a 15-point turnaround if he nails that goal. Did look strong in the contest, looked more energised this week, but in saying that, still a luxury trade-out target for mine if you can afford to do so. As I mentioned before, leading into the game, had 5 sub-tons. He just hasn't been producing near enough for one of our premium midfield slots. And if you could afford to do so, I think Cripps to steal would be a really nice move. But with Hewitt out this week, I can see why people would be tempted just to give him one more week. But at the same time, based off what he has been producing lately, yeah, it's fine to move him on. On to the midfielders, 250 to 500k. A couple of blokes we'll discuss here. And at the top of the list this week, love him or hate him, he's one of my favourite players in the comp. The self-proclaimed barometer, the beast, loves to shoot the crossbow to celebrate a goal. We have Reece Matheson. I was advocating for the beast to come into the side well before 2 weeks ago, as his form in the twos has just been sublime. He's just dominating. And bias aside, due to his contested nature, he actually has the ability to score pretty well. Main issue here is where does he fit in the 22? On current form, he should keep his spot. But in saying that, his job security would most likely be a week-to-week proposition. So a risky selection, but if he plays the next 4 games, he could actually provide some good pod cover. Chera has a 3-round average in triple figures after scoring a pair of 103s and 95 in the last 3. Faces Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne and the Pies in the next 4. Newcombe, he'll feature pretty highly, I think, in their Rising Star Award this year. He's just a machine, tough unit, scored a lovely 120 plus over the weekends, but keep in mind that this is the first time he's gone over the ton in the last 2 months. So a long time between drinks and a little hard to trust for mine, but great season from Newcombe. And the next 2 blokes, ex-teammates, Patrick Dangerfield and Tim Kelly, combined for a total of 35 points between them last week. I'll say that again. 35 points between them. Danger gathered 11 disposals, gave away 3 free kicks for 24 points. Never gone that low before playing a full game. But if you think that's low, Tully said, hold my beer. Gathered just the 4 touches, gave away 3 free kicks as well, and amassed a grand total of 11 points. Now, I know that Kelly copped a knock last week, was dealing with a hard tag, but it's really hard to recommend either after last week's performance, and unfortunately, I've had to give him the poo symbol. On to the midfielders under 250k, and clearly the best buy from the list this week is the dreadlocked man up the top in Cully. CBA rate is fantastic, only averages 16 disposals in his first 2 games, but his tackle count is off tap with an average of 9. That's allowed him to punch out a 90 and a 76. West Coast surely want to continue to get more game time into him, so I think his job security looks really solid for the next month. If you're looking to downgrade in midfield or your forward line, lock this bloke in. Oh, geez, I felt for Cumberland last week. He played a really strong first half, tapered off a little bit in the last half, but was involved in a couple of really important acts. Nice contested mark and left foot to set up Bolton's last goal. But, yeah, obviously the thing people remember was his decision to play on in the final seconds. Unfortunately, the ship has sailed here as a SuperCoach selection, as all the other options are 75k plus cheaper. But just from a purely a football point of view, I really think that Richmond have a player on their hands here, and a little bit spewing that Brisbane passed on him because he was a Lions Academy player. back in the day. So, yeah, congratulations, Noah. You've had a really bright start to your career, mate. Holland should definitely keep his spot. This is pretty frustrating for me because he'll be starting at an inflated price next year, but good on him. Long overdue. Some people have had him as a loop all year, so they'd be loving it now. Did play a solid game. Could have had 3 goals. Kicked the 2, though. If you already own Cully, then Hollands could be fine to bring in, but I would rate him as my second most preferred option. Much prefer Cully over Hollands at this stage. And Sonzi, I also like as a player, scored a 59 and a 52 in his first 2 outings. Probably third in line, but he does have that 1 extra game over Hollands. On to the Rucks, and I don't think there's a lot here to discuss this week, unless you're a Darcy Cameron owner. Most people aren't experiencing any Ruck injury carnage at the moment, which is a nice relief, but to be totally honest, there isn't a single player on this list that I'd be expecting 100 plus guarantee. And I know there are never any guarantees in this game, but you know what I mean. Just none of these blokes fill me with great confidence. Goldie, the old warhorse, he holds the best 3-round average here with 110. Been a really good trading option for those that went with him earlier on this season. You know, Shrek becoming less confident in that big ceiling score of 160 plus. Still a chance, but just too many just there type scores. 2 metre, he's had an awesome last couple of months, but I'd take another player over him under that price if you're desperate for someone at a much cheaper price than one of the real premiums. Gawn hasn't looked himself over the last 3, maybe carrying something, but as we saw last week, can still produce an absolute monster. Very low price for his capabilities when fit, but certainly, yeah, don't trust him like I did earlier on the season. Witsy, he's taken the foot off the pedal lately, not seeing those ceiling type scores, and if you traded him in within the last, say, 6 weeks, I'd call this a failed pick. As a starting pick, though, still a master stroke for what he's given us throughout the season as a whole. Slim Tim looked good with a 122 on the weekend, coming up against Segler this week, and will likely spend the large majority of his minutes in the ruck. I was almost writing off the pick after what I'd seen the last 3 weeks, but I now go in with a little bit more confidence about what he can score from here on out. And I should also mention as well that last week he achieved a couple of season highs. So he got 2 goals, previous best was just the 1, and he did clunk 10 marks, previous best was 8. So that's really good to see as an owner. Now, Raul Marshall, he was a man I was alluding to before when I said I like someone under 2 metres price. Didn't set the world on fire last week, but we all know what his average looks like without Ryder in the team. His scoring power just goes to another level when playing solo ruck. So with 4 rounds to go, available at a low price, has that DPP, I think he could actually be a solid option. The injury risk is real, but the ceiling's high. So the old risk versus reward scenario here. We'll quickly skip down the Blitzarves, and with Segler coming into the side for his first game in the hoops, I've just got no idea what his role is going to be, but he does seem to score well wherever he plays. I'd still go Rowan though. And lastly, we'll finish with Darcy Cameron. I have been advising people to plan for this for a while now. Grundy looks set to return to the VFL this week, and then most likely will return to the senior side the week after. Darcy Cameron's ruck minutes were slashed last week. Cox was the preferred ruck option for that number 1 role. I'm guessing that they may have just wanted to see how Cameron fares up forward in that relief role, planning for when Grundy does come back. I'm not sure if that's the reason. That's more of a guess. He only had the 10 hitouts, which was clearly his lowest since Grundy exited the side. And the scoring pattern has been evident in the last month. Down, down, down. And even when he has been playing that main role, scores of 95, 93, 78, and 71 aren't great. And if you can, I think it's definitely time to move him on. Look, he's been a great selection, really rewarded those who took the punt, but the writing was always on the rule that eventually he would regress to more of a 70 type average. So if you've got the trades, highly advise trading him out. If you've got him in the forward line, we'll discuss some forwards now. If you're looking to get a ruckman in, yeah, not confident on many. Onto the forwards, 500k plus, and the man up the top, the Bont, has been in ridiculous form, just taking his game to another level over the last fortnight. Backed up his monster 181 with a 161 last week. Only the 26 touches, but he doesn't need any more than that. Just super damaging with his disposal. Kicked a goal, laid the 9 tackles. Just another captain's game from the Bont, and could be a season killer if you don't own him because he's the F1 by a country mile at the moment. Dilmore, he's been killing it since moving into the midfield. Even playing that forward role has been a pretty consistent scorer in 2022. Second highest round average on the list. And my man Eno did bring him in last week, which was a ripper move. So well done, mate. 135, 113 and a 124 in the last three. Huge pod, ownership percentage of only 3%. So very hard to look past if you want to go away from the crowd. Rosie, only the 21 touches, 7 contested from him on the weekend. Did lay 7 tackles, which was nice. He is another one who has really excelled in his midfield role, showing us his ceiling with a 150 plus in last month, has a high floor in the role, faces Collingwood, Richmond, Essendon and Adelaide, so a really nice midfield draw to end the year and could be a nice point of difference. Libba, it was his first sub-ton in the last 2 months, so we can certainly forgive him here. Still a 90 plus, so that's all good. Still has a role, one of the best clearance players in the comp, and I expect him to bounce back against a Geelong outfit this week. Cogs just trucking along, another low ton, only the 21 touches, did kick a couple of snags, which was lucky, but yeah, look, what do we say? He's highly owned, giving us 100 plus most weeks. We're pretty pleased with what he's producing. Parker, very average Supercoach wise during the last 5 weeks. Did go through a bit of a purple patch, but slowed down a little now. Still giving us 90s, which is okay, but we do want more from Parker. I'm expecting better things from him to finish off the season. And I think the Swannies are a red-hot chance for a top 4 position. Baz, look, he really butchered the ball in his comeback game, but improved his efficiency last week. Went a more respectable... Is it respectable? Yeah, well, it is 71%. Not fantastic, but all good. 113 points from 28 touches and 5 tackles. That was a pretty decent return. Could be a nice pod that could come home strong. And Will Brodie is named to play this week after some concerns about some strapping around his calf at training. Possibly a slight chance of laid out, but I am expecting him to play. Had a massive first half last week, was on 70 points at half time, then really faded. I'm not sure if he may have hurt his calf during the game or not. May have been a reason why he slowed down, but in the end didn't quite get to 100, and that was super disappointing. But what a starting pick he has been. With Fife out, I'm expecting him to up his scoring slightly, as there's just another slice of the pie available now. So, as Will Brodie, an owner of Will Brodie, I'm a pretty happy man still. Onto the forwards, 250 to 500k, and at the top of the list we have Tommy Papley. A bit of a surprise this one, but he's gone 105, 84, 128, 106 and a 127 in his last 5. I certainly didn't see this coming. We've seen scores in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, but lately he's been really consistent. Kicked 2 goals in every one of his last 5 matches bar one. Also kicked 12 behinds during that time. So this average could have been even more if he had his kicking boots on, playing up the ground a little bit more, finding more of the football, but also starting as a deep forward at times. It would take a brave coach to select him, but you can't deny his recent form. Sam Berry, love what this bloke brings to the table. A 121 and a 140 in the last 2 weeks. And how's this for a stat? And surely it would have to be close to a record for a 2-week period. He has laid 31 tackles in the last 2 weeks. That is mind-blowing numbers. 17 and then 14 last week. Just thrives on the contest, piles on the defensive pressure. It seems near on impossible to keep those tackle numbers up, but even at 10 a game, that's a lot of extra points. Heaney, a 112, 104 and a 106 in the last 3. That's been a really nice reward for owners. Lots of people also have him as a swing man, so really nice coverage at the moment for those people. I've lost out on trading Heaney to English a little while back, but at the same time, the move did make sense with the form that both players are in. He's a player we can never fully trust, but with 300s on the trot, he's one of the most talented players in the comp when things are clicking for him, and Champion Data also rate him pretty highly. So, yeah, as I said, I can never trust him, but also a potentially solid option at the same time. The Tomahawk, his biggest return since round 1, Supercoach-wise this is with a nice 140 plus. Does play the Eagles in our Supercoach Grand Final, which could be enticing, but with Tommy, you never really know what to expect. He's been very up and down this season, far from a reliable option, but at the same time can go big, and Geelong are in ripping form. The Tarantula being a solid last month for him, 111, 109, 85 and a 113. Not getting the value you were a couple of weeks ago, but worth a shout under 480k in current form. he'd probably be my most preferred option on this list. And I think he can average 100 plus for the next 4 weeks. He's playing through the midfield, which is nice. And that will allow him to potentially even pump out a ceiling game. So don't mind the Tarantula as a trade-in option if you don't really have the money for one of those uber elites. Bolton is an absolute roller coaster who would do my head in as an owner. Such a talented, exciting player, but the variation in his scoring is ridiculous. Also burnt a few last year as well. And Dunkley, well, he... What do you say? Well, look, back to last week, he had a 67 to 102 SuperCoach to fantasy ratio. So that provides you with a little bit of confidence, but that's super frustrating as a SuperCoach player. 8 Muppets last week surely didn't help, only went at 66% efficiency. 24 touches and 6 tackles isn't a disaster. But if you look at that 3-round average, it is a total disaster. If I was a non-Bont owner, I'd happily use 2 trades to move on Dunkley for Bont. He'd actually be a nice antipod at the moment. But look, he is one of those players that can bounce back. But in current form, yeah, a bit of a thorn in my SuperCoach side. And we'll finish off with the forwards under 250k. Thanks very much for sticking with me. We've got Ash Johnson, looks like a player, scored a 67 in round 18 and a 61 last week. Kicked a couple of goals in his first, then added another 3 against the Bombers. Has been named this week and probably the number 1 option on this list. Unfortunately, Carmichael hasn't been named, possible sub candidate, but not ideal. That's pretty unfortunate because when he did come on as a sub last week, really did have an impact. And Shannon Neal hasn't been named this week. Segler comes in for his first game. Cross him off your list. So that's it from me for now, guys. All the best luck with your trade-ins and your trade-outs this week, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Cheers, bye.